A very worthy winner, not just of Best Office Development, but as I said earlier, Best Heritage Development and overall the best development in this year's awards. We'll start it off with Jackie, who was one of our judging panel to put Carl under the spotlight.
Thanks very much, Adrian. Carl, I was keen if you could talk a little bit about the issues that you may have had with the Heritage Council in particular, and dealing with them to try and, I guess, realise your vision, particularly with the alterations that you needed to make to those heritage buildings across St George's Terrace.
Working with the Heritage Council was very productive, and I think coming from a point of view where the developers' ambitions for the site were very aligned with what they wanted to achieve. Perth lost most of its good heritage stock along St George's Terrace in the 60s and 70s sort of booms, and fortunately we were able to have 6 fantastic buildings, albeit that they were in a derelict state, and the development really utilised that streetscape, repurposed those buildings back into effectively still being office buildings, which is what they started out as, and brought retail activation into it, which was sadly lacking on St George's Terrace generally and in the Perth CBD. So the result was nearly over a $60 million spend on those buildings specifically, and really bringing them back to life and clearing really what was almost a missing couple of teeth in the streetscape of Perth's main street.
So there weren't any particular contentious issues about bits of buildings that you wanted to pull down?
It was a little bit complex in terms of resolving the retailers' ambitions into that space around signage and around sort of opening buildings up, and which is pretty much consistent with retailers in any asset. But we had a very good, productive and early engagement with the authorities, and I mean there was obviously overlays of complexity of getting services into older buildings and stuff like that, which things like decent exhaust for the F&B and so on, but. I think that the D&C team worked really well to sort of pull off some great results. At the end of the day, those buildings were substantially in pretty good shape. It was really only 1 or 2 of the sort of southern facades that needed to be reworked.
Sure. Carl, in terms of the heritage use, were the uses of the spaces imposed on you by council, or were they considered best use by yourselves? Did you consider any other uses, and if not, why were they rejected?
Specifically in the heritage spaces. Look, it just came under the general planning sort of allowance for what was in there. As mentioned, a couple of those buildings were originally office buildings, and they were really returned to office buildings. It was at one stage Perth wasn't the city ordinances wouldn't allow retail onto St George's Terrace, so they were very motivated to get it back in there and get it activated. The Perth Tech building, which was Perth's first tertiary institution, had some more complex spaces that really didn't suit office or retail, and that's got some gallery space put into it. And then probably the main change of usage was the print hall, and that was the original print hall for the West Australian newspaper, and with working with the Colonial Group had a fantastic outcome in that, and putting high-end F&B into it. So there was an alignment around activation and sort of getting those buildings back into service, as it were, to prevent them to decaying really continuously.
Congratulations on a very iconic building. My question is more around innovation. What was your brief for innovation, and what scorecard would you give yourself in terms of achieving that brief?
The innovation components of it, really, from a base building point of view, was to really work very hard at a workspace that hadn't been delivered in Perth, and that's Australia's largest side core building, so it presented some structural challenges, and I think that as a result of that, we've got a great platform that BHP has embraced and really run with, and their innovation sort of program sprang off the back of that, and they've put the top 2 floors are given over to staff lounge and amenity, which is a great sort of diagram rather than it just sort of be the C-suite upstairs, and really getting elements of vertical village going and stuff. And I think we've done very well in that, but it's also off a base that I think Perth is probably not quite at the level that some of the eastern cities are at with a workplace point of view, but I think the robustness of the building gives us a chance to push that along a bit further. Probably the other, sort of innovation is really challenging the ground plane and trying to layer up, take something as principally as an office development and trying to activate it 7 days a week and through day and night sort of cycles. So that's a big push on the retail mix and the activation, including overlaying daycare and wellness and other components in there that see it have a life beyond sort of a straight 9 to 5 office environment.
And the sort of the scorecard you'd give yourself on that, and what sort of uncharted areas of innovation would you sort of perhaps tap into next time?
I think we probably give ourselves 8 out of 10, and I think like I said, I would probably push. Would be even braver about the ground plane in a way. Like, it was a big thing to take on, and I think we'd sort of push more usages into that. Fortunately, we've got the ability that we're now building the second tower behind it, which is going to be Perth's first premium building in 20 years. A few floors left to go if you're interested, and. That's going to be. We're pushing it one level up in sustainability, and we're pushing it, sort of in the workplace again and facade. We're really pushing that along for fantastically clear facades with great views and still high performance from an energy point of view.
So just on that, you mentioned there the next building you're pushing on in the innovation. How are you doing that? What things are you going to go and do now?
We're including cogen in it, so it'll be the first building, or it's actually Trigen, will be the first building in Perth delivered with Trigen. So we're really pushing the facade performance. We've got floor-to-ceiling glazing, very clear, but still getting our energy performance. It's 2,100 square metre floor plates without a single column, so we're really pushing structure, and it's one single lift riser, so it's a fantastically sort of connected workplace.
What do you think was probably the most difficult aspect of the whole redevelopment? I mean, it's a significant redevelopment. I'm from Perth, so I watched it, and it's very large. It covers a large land area. What was the most difficult thing to overcome?
Yeah, and I think from that aerial photo, you see that the actual tower site is almost completely landlocked. With the heritage buildings on St George's Terrace and the site to the south, and so the site had its genesis back in the Westralia Square days when it was back in the 80s, and it had got started with one building and left a gaping wound for the next sort of 20 years. So it was really getting back in there and trying to piece together those neighbourhood agreements, because we needed a lot of cooperation with the neighbours around there, and to get access and to make sure that we sort of site access from a pedestrian, vehicular, and just a general sort of amenity still work. So I polled some of the guys that were there in the very beginning, and without question they all said it's the neighbours.
Interesting.
The post mining boom, has that affected your occupancy?
No, the building we were 100% leased on completion, both the heritage and the office, which it really arrived in a sweet spot. We've seen a little bit of subletting, 2 floors I think that have changed hands since that time. But our ambition with the development is really to be the premier office building in the city, so that the one that no matter where you get to, that's the one that will probably suffer vacancy least, I suppose. Because it's such a great product, very prominent, very new, that it's set, sort of set to weather. Our business understands as much as anyone that Perth is very cyclical, but it's really about getting the right product in a gateway location and sort of riding through the cycles.